The Appalachian Mountains are some of the oldest in the world, and we just happen to live in them. One thing we can tell you, there are ghosts in the mountains.
Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Ghosts in the Mountains. I am your host, as always, Caleb Hanks. And what would I be? What would I be without my brilliant, beautiful, bearded co-host, the Dr. Captain Burgess? You know him, you love him. How you doing tonight, brother?
I am doing merry and bright and all the holiday adjectives. It's Christmas Eve, right?
Yes, it is Christmas Eve, as far as everybody knows.
Yes.
I am all of those things as well. I'm a little worn out because the holiday season, it's always supposed to be this cozy, fun, relaxing thing, and it rarely ever is.
Yeah, our schedules for December got filled up pretty quickly. It's been fun, but exhausting. But, looking forward to winding down for a couple days, enjoying a nice long weekend.
You and me both, brother. I want to cozy up like a cat underneath the Christmas tree, hope it doesn't catch on fire, and just snuggle, and continue to hope that the tree doesn't catch on fire. But, speaking of holiday fears, we've been serving up a couple of those and gotten into some interesting folklore this Christmas season, which I have really, really enjoyed those episodes.
Yeah, it's been a fun avenue to explore.
Absolutely. But on a couple of the past episodes that we talked about with some of the, strange and whimsical things in the holiday season, I recalled a quick story where I was hanging out with none other than the great JPW, Joshua P. Warren, back in the day, and I slipped in his kitchen and hit my head on the ground, and I had this vision of Christmas, but aliens. I was like, oh, man. There's this cozy little scene in my head of, like snow-covered pine trees, but then there were just these big swirling UFOs in the sky. It's like, oh man, that is so awesome. I didn't know too much about the whole UFO phenomenon at that point. I was more interested in the ghosts and the paranormal and all that stuff. But in subsequent years, I went on to learn a lot more about the UFO things. And lo and behold, there were some people out there that supposedly experienced almost exactly what I was talking about.
Basically so, yeah.
And so that is why today we're going to talk about one of the most infamous, somewhat for the most part, Christmas Day related strange things. We've done a lot about ghosts. We've done a lot about folklore, and, Krampus is a borderline cryptid.
I think we could call him a cryptid.
Yeah, but it's high time that we pull it back into the realm of the aliens. And so that is why tonight we are doing what we're calling the Rendlesham Christmas UFO. Now, this is a really very popular story in the UFO community. But, Austin and I being ghost guys, we're both very much interested in the extraterrestrial phenomenon and UFOs and the whole nine yards. We don't talk about it as much on this show, but we both really like it. But for some reason, this is one that you and I both slept on.
Yeah, it's what I've known about, but on like a pretty surface level basis for a long time. But for something that's kind of referred to as the British Roswell, I definitely undersold this for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I know for a fact that I've seen, some segments on maybe some like Travel Channel or History Channel shows about it. I've seen some sort of dramatization of this,
yeah,
but I can't remember exactly where that was that I saw that. So I'm very interested to find out more about this one because it's one of those cases where I've heard it talked about over the years a lot, but it's just not something I've ever really, just gone down the rabbit hole on the research. So I think it's going to be good for both of us to familiarize ourselves with these cases, for when we end up in these inevitable situations where we're talking to a lot of people that know a lot about UFOs.
Yeah, no joke. And like you said, like this is a pretty big deal, and for good reason too, because I think not many other UFO cases have like the amount of highly credible witnesses, basically on 2 separate nights around these events, I should say. They've got supporting evidence with like physical traces. They have an official government memo detailing the events in this. They have real-time tape recorded or tapes, just audio recordings of the colonel that night going out and field investigating when he was seeing some crazy shit out in the forest there.
Right.
So like there is some pretty well documented evidence to go along with this that is coming from military and government officials.
No doubt. So, I mean, I usually say, where do we begin? But I think the good place to begin is, what year did all this start? Where are we? What time period?
So this one starts in 1980, so not like super far back in the grand scheme of things and in kind of the UFO lore. But we do have to go across the pond for this one, as they say. I know we've been branching out a lot the past few months, but I think you'll see why this one is so centric to the time of year and why this one fits into kind of our holiday schedule nicely.
Are there mountains over there where this happened?
I don't think so. There's a forest, but
no ghosts, no mountains.
Ghost in the forest.
You're getting the exact podcast you paid for today, fam.
We'll get back to a lot of the ghostly mountain centric stuff in the new year, but for now, I think this one has a nice tie-in.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I said, it all starts back in 1980 on December 26th. Actually, some accounts say it was around 3 a.m. So technically, that would make that like Christmas night. You just stayed up till 3 a.m. if you're a night owl.
So this actually does take
the wee
place.
Hours of December 26th, 3 a.m.
Schrodinger's holiday. It's Christmas and Boxing Day.
There you go. Depends on when you break up your days if you're a night owl, I guess.
Yeah.
How does that work for you? If you're awake at 3 a.m. on December 26th, is that considered Christmas Day for you, or is that already passed into the next day?
Yeah, I mean, I usually do the midnight thing, but who knows? Who
knows how that works? So anyways, this story takes place in an area known as Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk, England. This area is significant. I'll go ahead and say it's located between 2 Air Force bases. One's known as Woodbridge, and the other is known as Bentwater, and they're on England's east coast. And now, just to clarify here, because I was a little confused, these are supposedly Royal Air Force bases, but they were being occupied by the United States Air Force at the time. So I guess Bentwaters and the other base, Woodbridge, were actually used by the United States during the Cold War, and I think Bentwaters was actually in operation for the U.S. up until 1993.
Right, so all the people operating this are Americans.
Yeah, exactly. Right. They're just stationed overseas at a Air Force designated for the Royal Air Force, but, UN, I guess.
Okay, gotcha.
That's my interpretation of it, at least. At least some sort of allied diplomacy to be able to share a facility like that.
Yeah.
Or use a facility. So anyways, 2 United States Air Force patrolmen, they were working at the Woodbridge East Gate. This is, again, night of wee hours of December 26th. They spot some unusual lights descending into Rendlesham Forest itself. Now, Air Force officers Jim Peniston and John Burroughs and others in a small team are dispatched to kind of investigate the lights and whatever they saw going into the forest. And one member of the team stayed on patrol at the East Gate, another stayed on the edge of the forest. But things started to get weird because they started to lose radio contact with the rest of the team as they entered the forest. And things kind of started to go down from there.
That's an interesting element of that.
The radio contact goes out. Yeah. A little interesting. I think that's kind of a common thread you see in some of the other, whether that's batteries draining or electronics failing. Kind of goes along that same line of thought, I would think.
They're jamming the signals.
So in a statement published a year later in 1981, Officer Burroughs said that the woods lit up and you could hear all kinds of farm animals making lots of noises. You could see light down by a farmer's house on the forest edge. And we climbed over the fence and started walking towards the red and blue lights, and they just disappeared. So his statement on this, if you will, is pretty vague. There's definitely lights present, but there's not a lot of interpretation of what those lights could have been. Yeah. Now, Officer Peniston, who was with him, His account describes a triangular-shaped craft, and what he described as covered in hieroglyphic-like characters. And in his statement, he said the following: I estimated it to be about 3 meters tall and about 3 meters wide at the base. No landing gear was apparent, but it seemed that it was on fixed legs. I moved a little closer, I walked around the craft, and finally, I walked right up to the craft. I noticed the fabric of the shell was smooth, opaque, like black glass. So pretty drastic different reports or interpretations. I would say that goes kind of beyond an interpretation when one officer is claiming to walk up and essentially be able to touch this craft directly.
Yeah, I'm always bad with my inches to meters conversion stuff. I mean, so how big is that thing as far as I think my question is, did it appear to this person as though it
was large?
That an occupant could have been inside of it.
Yeah. That
it was big enough.
Mm-hmm, yeah, that was the interpretation of that. And there's a little more on that, but I think that comes the following day in some of these sightings. But one of the other interesting notes here is that when the officers say they tried to approach it, like you kind of see in Penniston's account where he's describing it, he's kind of alluding to it taking a long time to get up to this thing. They said when they tried to approach it, it was almost like they were walking in slow motion, like something was like slowing them down physically to stop them from approaching it at what would be a normal walking pace.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot about these ideas of UFOs having this essentially this space-time bubble that it operates in, as to where, that's why you can see them going from space to into our atmosphere and then sometimes going underwater and completely
essentially transmedium
and being completely uninhibited by anything.
Yeah. So Officer Penniston reported touching the craft and it feeling smooth and it was like a warm surface. But then not long after he was touching it, he said the thing just rose into the air, started flashing, and then its legs just kind of retracted into it, and it just kind of smoothly maneuvered through the trees before disappearing.
You'll have that.
Yeah. The soldiers, they chased it into the field, and that's when they noticed it just abruptly shot upward. So at one point, it was just gliding smoothly through the trees as they were chasing it, and then it just zipped off into the sky in a completely vertical motion.
Yeah, you hear about them doing that too.
Yep, they'll do that. Yeah. So at this point, some of the witnesses say that they lost consciousness, and when they came to, it was almost like they had a time slip. They were back in the forest, but they didn't know how long they'd been out for. They'd kind of just been in a trance state, and it was kind of a shared experience between a few of the witnesses from the team investigating.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting because when you compare that to something like the Travis Walton case, where there were multiple people that worked with him in that lumber crew, they all saw the craft. They saw him get abducted, essentially, but they didn't appear to have any missing time stuff like Travis
exactly. They saw him come up, but it wasn't for, another week until Travis showed back up. And
it was like
where
5 days.
How have you been?
And then, but these guys, I think the key difference is these guys all seemingly got really close to it.
Yeah, and it kind of tranced them out.
That's really weird.
Yeah, for sure. So there's the book, it's called Encounter in Rendlesham Forest. Penniston was quoted as saying, "I left the forest a different man. I was in awe of the technology, and yes, knowing that it was not an aircraft which we could have manufactured in 1980 or even now." So basically, he's kind of alluding to this leaving a lasting impact on him as just a single event that changed the trajectory of his entire life.
I'd say so. I'd probably be looking at the world a little different if I'd seen that shit.
Yeah, to go along with that, unfortunately, both Penniston and Burroughs have suffered from some post-traumatic stress disorder since the event. This was reported in an interview in 2015 when they were later kind of going back and recapping this whole experience and some of the effects it's had on them. But in recent years, Penniston has claimed that the craft telepathically transmitted binary code into his brain. So, as you can see, both Burroughs and Penniston were impacted by something strange here. Burroughs had a little more vague interpretation. Penniston is very direct with what he's attributing this experience to be.
Sure.
And I think that's something that's probably not uncommon. It's a shared experience, but some people view it through a different lens, and they're going to interpret it to be something completely else through whatever their preconceived notions might be, or just prior belief systems and structures like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That whole thing is just very, very strange. I mean, it does make you think. It's like, good Lord, if I had actually seen something like that close, it would definitely turn your world around. Now, I have a question about the idea of this guy getting the binary code projected into his brain. Did he just like perceive or hear a bunch of ones and zeros?
I think it was kind of like the full package. Like he got a mental image of the ones and zeros being projected into his brain. So
the aliens came all this way to show you the Matrix.
If only I knew how to read what you're trying to tell me.
It's like, look, we're aliens, but look, everybody loves Keanu.
Maybe they just, you're tired of Christmas movies. Check out this. This one's a pretty good.
Yeah, they're like,
you're not ready for this. Just wait wait about 20 years.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this would have been before it came out, but it's like, we're already sick of Macaulay Culkin. Check out The Matrix. It's from the future. It's awesome.
You might be onto something. So anyways, a little bit after 4 a.m. that morning, night, however you want to perceive that, local police were called out to the scene, but reportedly, the only lights they could see were ones from the Orford Ness Lighthouse, which was some miles away on the coast. They come out to the scene, and it's like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. Maybe it's already gone. The only light I see is coming from that lighthouse over there. And that does play a role a little bit later. But the following day, a small team went out to investigate the area, and they reported trees with broken tops and burn marks on the leaves, which I think is pretty significant, honestly. They reported 3 triangular depressions on the ground, which were about 1.5 inches deep and 7 inches wide. And when they tested with Geiger counters, radiation levels recorded at the site, and specifically at those indentations, were unusually high.
Right.
So I think that's pretty interesting because, we've talked about this with the Snippy case, with stuff at Skinwalker Ranch. Like, in a lot of these big UFO hotspots, cases, whatever you want to call them, high radiation levels is something you perceive pretty commonly.
I don't know if this one rings a bell with you at all, but I know of another UFO case. I'm fairly certain it happened in England, where there was somebody that had like a farm, and this thing comes down, and the next thing they know, there's like military presence like all over the place. They said it was like scanning the ground and shooting out lasers, but they shot at it.
Yeah.
And it like apparently deflected it, but the blast like messed up some trees around there. I can never remember the name of this damn case, but it's interesting to me that here's this other situation that happened in England.
Yeah, right there.
Where the same thing is happening. And I think it, timeline wise was pretty close.
Interesting. Oh, I'd love to see where that stacked up on the timeline.
Yeah,
just to see if it was around that 1980 or not. Who knows?
Yeah.
So anyways, at 10:30 a.m., local police were called out again. This time they wanted the police to see the impressions that they found. And the police were pretty much unconvinced. They wrote it off. They said it could have been made by an animal. I think they ended up attributing to rabbits scratching out something in the ground to bury whatever their findings were in the winter. And that ended up being when the official, whatever you want to call it, report documented the indentations to be.
All right.
Yeah. Seems logical, I guess.
Tell that to Lonnie Zamora.
Yeah. So then on December 27th, 2 nights basically after the first reported incident, Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt was ready to go out and investigate this for himself. He was pretty much a known skeptic, and he was doing this just to set out to disprove all the wild theories that were starting to circulate around his base. Because as you can imagine, your officers see something like this, multiple witnesses, like it's pretty much the talk of the base around this time, and he's having none of it. He doesn't believe in any of the woo-woo bullshit, and he wants to go and set the record straight.
Understandably.
So in the early hours, as it turns into December 28th, another smaller group spotted a dancing red light inside what they described as an eerily pulsating fog. I guess they described it as a pillar of yellowish mist, and it transformed itself into something that looks like a huge eye. And they basically described this as being like this ominous, glowing, floating eye.
Get out of here, Sauron.
Yeah, exactly.
You're drunk.
I mean, that's about the biggest image you could get. Only he doesn't have the tower. He's just free floating this time.
That's when you're really scared.
That's even more terrifying.
Oh God,
He's on the move.
Yeah. Holy shit.
Yeah. So they basically alerted Holt's group because they were out in separate groups. So this is a whole nother group, their team than what Holt was in. And then Holt sees this. He notices that the light or the eye suddenly starts heading towards them. And one of the reports said that it was spewing forth a waterfall of different colors. So basically it was shooting out some kind of energy or some form that was being represented in a waterfall of colors. Meanwhile, the second group spotted a glowing domed object. And in this object, this is where they noticed shadows of figures visibly moving around the craft.
Oh, damn.
Like they could see in through some sort of window inside that craft and couldn't tell exactly what they were, but they said they saw shadows moving around inside.
All right.
Yeah, so that's when you start to get into the craft's occupants. And it's reported from there, the craft just kind of moved through the forest. It avoided hitting trees, just gliding smoothly. And then that's when another, some reports call it another craft, some call it another light, but another something appears, whether it's a light or a craft. And that new light moves above them, sends down a white laser-like beam, and lands 10 feet from them. And suddenly the light switches off and the object just flies off. More lights are spotted elsewhere around the forest, some of them with like pieces hanging down from them. Some of them looked more like a craft. Some of them looked more like just a light. But the object kind of lingered in the sky for an hour before just eventually completely disappearing after what they saw with some of these other lights spotted in the area. And then it just, like I said, it took off. But when more lights were spotted, Holt took out his tape recorder and he started recording his whole experience, just kind of narrating along. And the resulting audio tape, it's been declassified, in years since then, and it is now public domain, and it could be listened to if you want to go and listen to it. It's about 17 minutes long, but there's a lot of just him kind of narrating general stuff that's going on, but some of it's pretty sensational. One of the things that he says during the recording is, it looks like the eye is winking at you. Here he comes from the south. He's coming towards us now. Now we're observing what appears to be a beam coming to the ground. This is unreal. So this guy that comes into this as a skeptic ends up seeing something that's pretty unexplainable. And he luckily has this tape recorder with him, and he starts just recording and going with it and seeing basically what was unexplained aerial encounter. And it's verbally documented on the tape. There's a lot more in there that kind of goes into it, but some of it's, I don't know if we necessarily need to play it for listeners, because some of the 17 minutes is just a lot of, okay, we're walking through the forest now.
There's a stick.
Yeah. So
I am now looking at a tree.
You get a lot of that, but then you get some of these sensational descriptions like that. I think it really makes for an interesting piece of not only just evidence, just kind of UFO history to the lore.
I mean, number one, good on him for having this recorder on him, thinking ahead to, document like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, wow. That's the problem, is 90% of the time when people see these things, they don't have anything to document it with. But yeah, man, that's crazy. I'm assuming somebody's probably done like a YouTube supercut where it cuts out all the him walking around and looking at trees. And
there is one on YouTube that cuts it down to about, I think it's like 6 minutes.
Yeah.
It's got some unnecessary stuff, but it does get you what you need if you're looking for a
cool,
short, sweet, to the point version of that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, considered probably one of the most valuable pieces of evidence for this incident, if not just other UFO lore in general, knowing that this came from a respected Air Force official, not just an officer. This is Lieutenant Colonel. So,
yeah.
And he's coming in as a skeptic. Like, he's not going out to be like, I'm going to go look for some UFOs. He's going to be like, I'm going to show them this was just that lighthouse playing tricks on them. And he comes out of it with that.
Yeah, that's interesting, man.
Yeah. So it almost like, no matter you go back to Burroughs and Pennington's original interpretation and how they're kind of, split on, I won't say complete opinion, but just interpretation. And Halt comes in not believing any of it. And then he still kind of corroborates both of their experiences in a way.
Yeah. Wild.
Yeah, no joke. So anyways, Burroughs, Pennington, and Halt have been the most vocal in saying that they believe what they saw was indeed of extraterrestrial origin. But they're not the only eyewitnesses. There were a lot more that night that kind of add to and corroborate their story. They've just been the most vocal and kind of the faces behind putting the story out there to the public.
Right, yeah. So some of the people that saw this, they have never come out to the public that they saw it?
Allegedly, I guess so, because there were probably groups of, I've heard, upwards of 20 people being around to witness this, and there aren't that many witnesses out in the public, whether you're looking at books or YouTube videos. And, as we'll kind of get into here shortly, there's some witnesses that are just coming around nowadays and telling their version of the story.
Oh, damn.
And coming out into the public. So, but yeah, there was a little bit of mixed opinions on some of those other eyewitnesses. A lot of them do go on to kind of corroborate what they saw, where a lot of them are more skeptical on what they saw. Like, yeah, we saw some lights, but I don't know what I can attribute those to.
Yeah.
Which I think is a fair interpretation, especially if you're, kind of second guessing. And if you only do see lights in the sky, maybe jumping to attributing that to a craft is a bit of a stretch. But who knows? Maybe that's just how it appears to some people.
Well, especially in the 80s, we had a lot less air traffic going on back then. A lot less random things like drones in the air and a lot less satellites.
That's very true. Yeah, that's a good point.
I will just point out too, is like every once in a while, it's not impossible for people to, have like homemade experimental things that they've done. And if you live in Barnardsville, North Carolina, and you were hanging out around 2005 and you saw some weird lights in the sky, well, I might have an answer for you, because the Lemur team, the League of Energy Materialization and Unexplained Phenomena Research with a Silent P, we used to have a UFO creation contest, and we would like hook these things up to balloons and put them up in the sky in this big field out there in Barnardsville. So I bet there's probably some people out there that never knew that was what we were doing and saw some weird stuff. Because, there was all kinds of elaborate things that people would put together with like blinking LEDs and multicolored. Very interesting.
I got a buddy that grew up out there. So, Josh, let me know if you know anything about these incidents.
Yeah. I'm just debunking some stories.
Yeah, some local lore here. Yeah. But anyways, to jump back to the forest here, the forest across the pond, if you will. There was a security police commander, Sergeant Adrian Bastina, he was investigating the incident at the time. And he said when he arrived at the scene, he went on record saying that he saw this craft or light going in and out of the trees, almost like it was zipping through them intelligently. And at one stage, he said it was just stopped and hovering in one spot. So I think that's pretty significant.
Yeah.
Kind of goes along with the interpretations that we were discussing earlier. This one was pretty interesting to me because this kind of goes back to the United States. And I guess this was an event that occurred in the 90s. U.S. Senator James Exon, he basically launched this big secret investigation into this after one of his constituents told him about the incident. He just kind of became obsessed with it. But he never revealed his findings from his own investigation, even to his own staff members. But his quote about it was pretty telling. Or maybe not. He says only that he learned additional information that ties the Rendlesham case to other unexplained UFO incidents. And that's as much as he would say about it.
Right.
So.
as just forthcoming with information as always.
Yeah, right. That's big things coming.
Oh my God. Yeah, dude. I heard one of those today about some stuff.
I'm sure.
UFO related. Big things coming in 2026.
Yeah.
I bet.
So yeah, some of the more skeptical or even more rational people believe that lights could have been simply attributed to meteors or stars, or even beams of light from that nearby Orford lighthouse. And some people, they just believe that it was completely a hoax to begin with. Like there's no rational explanation other than people just intentionally set this up to play a trick.
be a little strange for military personnel and a lieutenant colonel to pull off a joke this
right,
that could potentially like literally get them thrown out of the military.
Well, the hoax theory, and I'll get into that shortly too, but it's more that the military was having a joke played on them is the interpretation.
I mean, I get that, but
yeah, still, that's a risky joke.
Not impossible, but the other side of it too is, I mean, like, this lieutenant colonel gets out there and sees this stuff. I'm sure he's probably seen a lot of like, air combat, or maybe not firsthand, but he's seen a lot of this stuff that most people maybe were not super familiar with, and he's looking at this and going, I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, you have to trust the experience of your witness. And when you're dealing with someone that's, not only military, you're dealing with an Air Force lieutenant colonel he's seen some things in the sky before, and he's going to know that he's not looking at a lighthouse coming around every 5 seconds.
No shit.
So, but I mean, you look at some of the official, whatever you want to call it, explanations, if you will, and that lighthouse theory comes up pretty often, unfortunately.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, you got to be pretty drunk to not know what the lighthouse is.
I know. That's what I'm saying. Like, y'all have been stationed there for a minute, right?
Yeah.
So, it's there. You know your surroundings. And if not, like, God, our military wasn't super prepared in the 80s, I guess.
I mean, I've had some wild nights on the Outer Banks, but I've always been able to tell what the lighthouse was.
Every 5 seconds. Oh, it's a UFO. No,
Holy
Caleb, that's
crap.
still the lighthouse.
No, it's just very consistent.
So yeah, well, as you can tell, this remains pretty much like one of the most hotly debated UFO cases to this day, because there's people that sit pretty firmly on their side of the argument with that. It's interesting because Nick Pope himself, who was a Ministry of Defense employee from 1985 to 2006, actually wrote a book titled Encounter in Rendlesham Forest, the inside story of the world's best documented UFO incident. And he described the incident saying that, like, this is not just some vague lights in the sky sighting. This is one where an actual or a UFO actually landed. So it's like there's a little bit more sustenance to these stories besides, oh, I saw some crazy shit in the sky.
Oh, man.
And you've met Nick Pope himself, so
I've hung with Nick a couple of times. I've been in a couple circles where I've gotten to like stand around and actually shoot the shit with him and my brother and some people about UFO stuff. But I have to say, I really, really like Nick Pope as a person. He is a very, very, very sweet person. The last time I saw him, he was literally poking his head backstage to pop in and encourage us for our hitchhiker show. And he was just saying, he's like, some of these people get up here and they want to be rock stars, but you guys, he was like, you guys are.
In the most British way possible,
exactly.
I'm sure.
I don't want to do his accent because I'm just going to offend people and mess it up. But yeah, it was, just hear that in Nick Pope's voice. It's great.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, like you say, like we've got Nick Pope going in and saying that this is such a big piece of UFO lore that, you can't ignore that. And the area has really kind of embraced that story and just the whole experience, if you will. In fact, if you go back to the Rendlesham Forest now, there's a UFO trail. You could hike around the forest, and there's like a guide map that'll guide you to 5 different spots that were related to that 1980 incident, supposedly, and some of the subsequent investigations. And there's even a replica UFO that someone built and has been installed on the trail. It's kind of like built into part of it. It's black, triangular shaped. It's got some hieroglyphic looking things on the side. So it's basically built to the description of what Pennington described in his experience.
Okay, so the Rendlesham Forest itself is not part of the military occupied land. It's like outside the
yeah.
That makes sense. I didn't realize that.
The military land kind of butts up to the forest. Or at least the bases, I should say, because they're probably not using a ton of land outside of what they need for airstrips and stuff like that.
Sure, yeah.
So yeah, I think that's pretty cool that you've got a place like this that embraces it to that level, to having that tourism aspect to it, because it's part of their history, it's part of UFO lore, and they've really kind of gone all in instead of trying to brush this one under the rug.
Yeah, man.
I guess
pretty cool.
with the evidence you have out there, this is a tough one to brush under the rug if that was your way of handling it.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, there's still a good bit of debate. Some of these eyewitnesses that were around, as I mentioned, they were a little more strict with their interpretation. They claimed that they didn't see a UFO at all. There was one witness named Ed Kabonsag. Probably said that wrong, but that's the best I got here.
Yeah, we got some
interesting names today.
For sure. Peniston, you don't want to mess up that one.
Right? So he described seeing a glowing light near the lighthouse itself, but as we got closer, he found that it was just one of the farmhouses being lit up, and they got to the vantage point where they could determine if they were just chasing the beacon of light from the lighthouse reflecting off the farmhouse. And he said that that's all he thought he saw. So he kind of made that generalized assumption of, well, that's all I was looking at. So that must be what everyone else was seeing too, because that's clearly the only thing that was going on in my mind or in my sight.
Yeah.
So that would, you've got a mixed bag of witnesses. That's one side of the story. But when you've got a handful of people saying they saw otherwise, who knows on that, especially trained observers like that. And the official report, as I mentioned, from the Ministry of Defense claimed that the lights did, in fact, come from that lighthouse nearby. And this lighthouse was in the line of sight. It was about 5 miles further east at the forest edge. And it was the brightest lighthouse in the UK at the time. And they basically assumed that because when they were listening to Holt's audio tape, the timing was a little bit consistent on the flashes, that it was somewhere around like that 5-second mark. And they're like, oh, well, clearly he's just narrating the flashes from the lighthouse, which I think is a pretty big disservice to Holt's character and judgment and
no doubt
and position to say that your lieutenant colonel is getting confused by light refractions coming from a lighthouse in an area that he's probably been stationed in for quite a while.
That's just wild, dude.
Yeah, man. I think this theory's been thrown out and analyzed from every angle. There's someone named Daniel Simpson who basically wrote an article in the Telegraph countering this, just saying the lighthouse theory is rubbish. Lighthouses don't fly down into forests, split up into 5 different lights, and zap off into space at Mach 3. They don't move through trees. They don't get mistaken by up to 20 witnesses from United States Air Force officials. And I mean, you're kind of preaching the choir, because I think that's the same thing we've been alluding to this whole time.
I don't know. I've seen some pretty advanced lighthouses in my day.
Some flying ones?
Oh, hell yeah, dude. You don't even want to go to a beach if they don't have a flying lighthouse.
That's the real scenic tour.
Yeah. Dude, you're in it. Yeah. Oh, my God.
Yeah. So there are a few different angles on what actually occurred that night. There is science writer and UFO skeptic Ian Ridpath, and he explains that on the night of the incident, the British Astronomical Association meteor section reported that an exceptionally brilliant meteor, termed a fireball officially by the astronomers, was seen over southern England. And it is shown that this fireball is most likely what they saw, but nothing actually landed in Rendlesham Forest that night. So I will give them this one, because if there was a officially government-tracked fireball from a meteorological society the same night of that incident, maybe that can explain some of the sightings. Maybe that can explain at least the initial bright flash or trajectory of the craft going into the forest. But if that was the case, how could they say nothing landed in the forest? If that was a meteor, like maybe it burned up before impact, but that seems kind of unlikely.
But dude, how unlucky are you if you're actually seeing an alien sighting, like a UFO sighting,
yeah,
and then a meteor flies by,
and they're like, "Oh no!"
Immediately discredits what you saw, and you're like, "Oh my God, I know what I saw."
Yeah. So,
wow, the luck of some people.
And who knows? I want to leave this open to interpretation here, because I want to be open to the events in this one. But this does explain a few other things, like maybe the scorches on the tree tops and, some other things that could have been aligned with that original sighting. But who knows? I think it's a little more believable than the lighthouse theory because, let's be real, that one's kind of a joke.
Yeah.
But, other skeptics have said that maybe the way the lights were seen, maybe with some of the bright stars distorted through like atmospheric or optical effects, could have caused some sort of light distortion on this. That one seems kind of like you're not giving enough credit to a trained observer, in my opinion, as well as the lighthouse one. But the fireball explanation, like, that's not a very common thing to happen. So, like, if you were to see that firsthand, heck, I think if either of us saw that, we wouldn't know what happened. We would be kind of scratching our heads at the very least.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the idea of it, this fireball comes, or this meteor comes into the atmosphere and there is some sort of atmospheric distortion. I don't take that complete. I mean, that happens. That sort of stuff does.
Yeah.
But again, like, what about that? Unless this was just one of the craziest looking like meteors coming into the atmosphere ever, what about that to anybody would make them think, I'm seeing a craft and I'm witnessing occupants?
Yeah,
I mean, that's
exactly. And I've seen them in the sky at night. I've not seen them close to the atmosphere. I've not seen anything like a meteor falling or anything like that.
Yeah.
And maybe that might be, in my interpretation, when they're describing something like a fireball type meteor, in my mind, that sounds pretty close to the atmosphere. Yeah. I would think.
Oh, dude, one time I was up on the parkway in the middle of the night, and I saw a meteor that was so like close overhead that, I mean, it looked like fire. I thought a plane was wrecking.
Yeah.
And that's the craziest one I've ever seen.
I could imagine.
But anyway,
yeah.
I mean, I'm making the point that sometimes these things can look really crazy, but again, never have I ever thought it was a UFO,
Yeah, and you would think that 20 plus United States Air Force officials would not all jump on that same line of thinking. If if you're able to distinguish that, you would hope that other military professionals would have that same ability to distinguish.
Especially Air Force.
Yeah, especially Air Force. They're trained observers. They're looking at the sky all day.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, despite some of these theories that have been written off as the official explanation, there's still a lot of people that believe this incident was indeed of extraterrestrial or ultra terrestrial origin, whether you want to look at that through whatever lens. But just a few weeks after the incident on January 13th of 1981, there was an official Air Force memo that was filed titled Unexplained Lights, where Holt basically gives his account of the experience that we just described, only he's putting this into the official documented military record and sending it off to the Ministry of Defense.
Right.
So that memo itself is another kind of compelling piece of evidence that adds to the credibility of this case. It's not something that was completely swept under the rug. You're allowing your lieutenant colonel to document and put this into the Ministry of Defense, basically detailing his experience and his interpretation of it.
Yeah, no doubt, man.
So that's, another thing that kind of just like furthers this one into the depths of UFO lore. And he's, since gone on record saying that he is one of the people that does believe what he witnessed was an extraterrestrial event. And there might have been some cover-up involved that he alludes to, which I think is a pretty big turnaround coming from a colonel of a base that wants to basically shut his officers up because they're talking about UFOs and aliens, goes out, sees some things that he can't explain. And now to this day, he's saying, yeah, I guess what I saw was probably extraterrestrial, which is a pretty big change of thought and thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume the military and the government would probably look at him talking about this thing and be like, okay, we're going to have to put in some damage control. So who knows, what other, methods were used to keep things quiet, but we have heard of that sort of stuff happening in the past quite a bit.
Yeah, for sure. But then by 1983, a newspaper in the UK ran a front page story titled UFO lands in Suffolk. And it's official from that point. Like, it's in the public sphere. It is broke like Roswell did pretty much immediately afher that. So
yeah, you can't keep us all quiet.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really kind of what cemented the case was this, kind of rogue newspaper article talking about the experience that had happened 3 years prior And the public gets a hold of that, and they're like, "Oh shit! There's a military memo. There's tapes that go along with this." I guess it was in 1944. It was a copy of Halt's tape that was released to UFO researchers by Colonel Sam Morgan. So basically, right after this newspaper article breaks, public gets interested in it, and then that's part of the movement that gets the tapes released in the first place. So they're just digging into this treasure trove of what they consider really credible evidence.
Yeah. Lucky them.
Yeah, no joke. So there's Miss Butler, who co-wrote a book in 1986. I think it was just called Sky Crash. She believes that whatever happened might have been tied to a recovered Russian satellite. And she was quoted as saying, "It's got to be something to do with America or the Russians or the Cold War," she says. And goes on to say that there's loads of files that have yet to be released about that time period. And there has to be some big cover up. Nobody will ever really know what happened. I'd like to get to the bottom of it, but I guess we never will.
If I had a quarter for every time Sputnik landed in the yard and then also got back up, took off, and flew off into space, buddy, I could retire.
So I was going to say, conspiracies were alive and well in the 80s too.
This is in the pre-X-Files era too.
Yeah, right. So, I think the debate around the topic kind of goes back and forth between the more sensational and the more skeptical. But in June of 2010, we start to get a little more kind of more current developments along this case, where retired at the time Colonel Charles Holt, he actually signed a notarized affidavit in which he again summarized what's happened and then again stated his belief that the event was of extraterrestrial origin and it was covered up by both the governments of the U.S. and the U.K. And he put this in notarized writing. I mean, 2010 isn't too far away in the grand scheme of things. Just 15 years ago, he was still not backing down from a story on this, which I think is has to have something said for it. But on the flip side of that, Base Commander Colonel Ted Conrad provided his statement about the incident, saying that they saw nothing, or he saw nothing that resembled what Colonel Holt described in either the sky or the ground. And we had people in a position to validate Holt's narrative, but none of them would give an interview. Conrad criticized Holt for his claims in the affidavit, saying that he should be ashamed and embarrassed by his allegations that his country and Britain both conspired to deceive citizens over this issue, saying that he knows better. Conrad also disputed the testimony of Sergeant Pennington, who claimed that to have touched the alien spacecraft. He said in his interview that Pennington at the time had not mentioned any such occurrence, and he didn't add that into his account until later. Conrad suggested that the entire incident might have been a hoax overall.
All right.
Yeah. So you get, I don't know if I could call that a firsthand witness, because this guy's saying that he was at the base and he didn't see anything. Yeah, fine. You were at the base and you didn't see anything. So that doesn't necessarily disprove what countless other people claim to have seen. Now you get into the stuff that you had other people in a position to validate Holt's narrative, but they weren't coming forward. Well, I don't think that that's such a shock, considering the stigma that's even to this day still kind of around reporting UFOs, especially from inside a military position like that.
Oh, of course, man.
So the fact that none of these guys were willing to go on record, like, sure, they didn't want to be the crazy guy on base. I get it. So.
Oh yeah. Well, there's all kinds of consequences that go along with talking about this stuff. I remember when pilots sometimes would talk about seeing stuff in the sky, they would get permanently grounded.
Yeah.
There's consequences for talking about this stuff, which again, this kind of is another thing that leads to why would these dudes make this shit up?
Yeah.
Other than the fact that maybe they genuinely were misidentifying something, but I don't know. There's a lot of moving parts in this.
Yeah. There's some other theories that kind of take the complete opposite direction on this. So there's a movie, it's just called The Rendlesham UFO Incident, and director Daniel Simpson, he basically, keep in mind this is a fictionalized account of the story. It was filmed on location there at the forest, but still fictionalized, dramatized version of what happened. But Daniel Simpson claims that he recently heard a very interesting story of a guy that went up to the Bentwaters Air Base, and because it's privately owned, some of those buildings are rented out to people. A company was up there and they wanted to have their internet sorted out. And this guy dug down, and he was a telecom guy. So he came back and they claimed that he was just white as a sheet and he couldn't believe it. He said he'd just come across these cables 2 feet down, and they were cables delivering such a powerful internet connection, but they were cables that had been there since 1980. And, doing a little bit of retracing on the timeline, there wasn't internet to our knowledge in 1980.
Yeah.
So,
but the thing about it is they always talk about how the military's got technology
exactly.
that's usually about 20 years out from what the public has. Well, that actually does fit the timeline.
You're right, because that's kind of what he alluded to. And he said that they were in 1980, yet they were so advanced from what we even got now. I'm told that all the time what we have technologically is so much behind what the military actually has.
I'm assuming he's talking about fiber optic.
Probably is what I would have to guess, is what that's kind of alluding to.
Well, there's a lot of, and take this with a grain of salt, but there's a lot of people that talk about the idea that we got a lot of technologies like fiber optics from reverse engineering UFO crashes and laser technology.
Wouldn't that be full circle?
I mean, but it would have made sense, if some of the earlier ones that had crashed in the 40s and they had that stuff up and running by the damn 80s. But one last thing I will say, there was a study that I saw recently where this guy realized that we are only using the littlest, tiniest bit of fiber optics full capacity. Mm-hmm. And he was saying there was something basically where he was able to put this other kind of light beam through it, and he was getting 1,000 times the internet speed.
Wild.
I don't know where this development has progressed since I read that, but it might be something to look into, because it's in the event that fiber optic technology actually is reverse engineered from alien craft, we've been using it wrong.
Right?
Anyway.
I will say probably take this one with a little bit of a grain of salt, because this is coming from, I heard from somebody this story, which, you kind of always have to, why isn't that somebody coming out and telling the story themselves? Mm-hmm. So, interesting story. And like you said, the timing probably is not too far off from what the technological difference is between us and military capabilities. But who knows if this was someone just kind of spinning a yarn and then getting caught up in a tale of what could be kind of urban legend for the area.
Yeah. I mean, I got to say it sounds a little not true.
Yeah. If it was the guy coming out and saying yes, this is my name, I work for this internet company, and this is what I found. Yeah. Why would I doubt that? Why would I argue that? But it's a director of some fictionalized documentary saying, "Oh, I heard from a guy that."
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, take that for what you will. Then in 2015, the then 75-year-old Colonel Halt announced that he had obtained written statements from radar operators at the Bentwaters Air Force Base in a nearby town airfield that an unknown object was in fact tracked at the exact time of the incident. So Holt sees this as evidence kind of supporting his claim. At the same time, if we're talking about a fireball being tracked in the area that same night and time frame, that very well could be what this kind of radar operator is picking up on in his report.
Not to mention, if it's breaking apart, there could be multiple radar spikes.
True. So I don't know if this one necessarily hurts or helps the case for Colonel Halt on this one, but it shows he's doing his due diligence to try to track down something that could corroborate his story, even as recent as 2015.
Yeah.
10 years ago.
Wow.
But interestingly enough, that same year, someone walking their dog in the Rendlesham Forest posted a video of what basically looks like a bright, moving, unidentified set of lights in the sky right above Rendlesham Forest. And it was filmed right alongside an Air Force helicopter. So maybe a bit of a modern occurrence for what might have been happening back in the 80s there. But I do think it's interesting that you see it, or it was witnessed right next to a helicopter, an Air Force helicopter, if nonetheless, because that is something you kind of see them reportedly being interested in what some of the military technology is up to.
Yeah, I think it also kind of sparks questions of experimental craft.
Yeah, that too.
I mean, you could kind of look at the whole thing through the lens of like, I don't know how many people are in the know, like what the chain of command is for people when they like test experimental craft. So it's like, was the government testing something to begin with? And this lieutenant was not clued in.
Yep.
He sees what he sees, doesn't know what it is.
And they let him
but the
roll
government,
with his story.
Well, exactly. And the government's not going to tell him because he's still on a need-to-know basis.
Yeah, and they're like, yeah, you talk about your UFOs because that'll get them off the trail of what's actually going on here.
I'm not completely opposed to that theory.
Yeah, I'm not either. I like I said, I think this is one where I leave the book open in my own kind of thoughts on this. But there is some more interesting recent developments on this. In December of 2018, Dr. David Clark, who is a British UFO researcher, reported a claim that the incident was, in fact, all a hoax and kind of a prank set up by the SAS as revenge, basically on the U.S. Air Force. Like it was some locals in the area, local officials in the area playing a prank on what they perceived as the foreign guys over here camping out at their Air Force base.
Well, all right, but what was the tech?
Yeah, okay. So according to the story, in August of 1980, the SAS parachuted into the Woodbridge Air Force Base to test security at the site, and the U.S. Air Force detected and captured the troops, who were then subsequently interrogated and reportedly even beaten up. I don't know the validity of that, but that's kind of the report on the investigator that goes into this, as he says. And as a form of revenge, the SAS devised their own prank version of this alien event. And as December approached, lights and colored flares were rigged in the woods. Black helium balloons were also used in kind of a remote-controlled kite-type setup to suspend the materials in the sky, activated by radio controls, and basically describes how he thinks this hoax could have been pulled off. But then later, Clark concluded in his own investigation that the whole story of the hoax was a hoax itself. So, big nowhere with that one.
I mean, that's so, oh my God.
So that was the hoax that so many had alluded to, which I mean, I think the premise of it is kind of believable and funny. A bunch of British people are like, yeah, screw these American guys that are over here on our base and beating up our guys. Let's go show them, what's up. And
I mean,
trick them into believing one of the biggest UFO incidents in history.
I mean, it's not impossible.
It's not. I think for that to be kept quiet for so long would be rare, especially if it was meant as some sort of like revenge prank. Like you got to have that gotcha moment at some point. There's got to be some validation, right?
I suppose so, but I think it's more damning to the American military to have like a decorated Air Force lieutenant out there still talking about UFOs.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
I mean, fair to let this guy, basically take this to his grave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but
it's probably not the first time.
But if that was true, that's funny as shit.
Yeah.
Like if they really did that, good on them.
Yeah.
More than likely, that story is not true.
Yeah. I mean, if the investigator that dug up the story concluded, well, this isn't true, I'm going to take his word for it.
Yeah.
Because he's the source on it.
Yeah, exactly.
But then as recently as just 2020, Officer Burroughs himself did publish a book, Weaponization of an Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon, in which he outlines research that he says shows that the incident was caused by experiments in harnessing an energy field in the forest. Now, remember that Officer Burroughs was one of the first initial two witnesses out of Pennington that night, but Burroughs was the one that had a little bit more of the reserved interpretation, just kind of, I saw some weird lights. And, just as recently as 5 years ago, he puts out a book saying that he's been digging into this since and found evidence to support that this was some sort of experiment that they were studying. He claims in his quote, they were studying the energy field for different applications to include military use. Burroughs claims that the lighthouse did come into play. It was emitting electromagnetic frequencies towards the Rendlesham Forest. And he stresses in his book that I never went on record myself to say it was a spaceship because I just didn't know what it was. What he saw, he says, was some sort of energy or plasma, which he does not write off as being its own form of intelligence.
So just so I have this straight, Pennington, he still says that he saw a craft.
Yeah.
Burroughs never says he saw something landed in the woods.
He saw some lights that went into the woods. He didn't say he saw the craft physically in the field like Pennington did.
Interesting.
He was part of the same investigation team, but I don't know if he was stationed at a different point. But I think his interpretation of it is pretty, really interesting, because you go back to the plasma form and not writing that off as its own form of intelligence. Man, if that doesn't go back to the Brown Mountain Light stuff and our argument about, plasma seems like one of the most kind of logical explanations, does that mean it has its own form of consciousness because of some of those experiences that people have had up close with it?
I mean, dude, a vast majority of UFO sightings are big glowing lights.
Yeah, they're not crafts.
Big spherical glowing lights.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would say a vast majority.
Yeah, I'd probably say at least 70% at least.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of talk recently. I mean, there's always been about this idea of like, are these rare Earth plasma phenomena?
Yeah,
and they're not even craft at all. So, I mean, who knows? I mean, but again, that's why the Brown Mountain Lights is such an important thing, because we potentially have this thing in the backyard that generates these damn things.
Yeah, it's like a petri dish in our backyard for something like this. Yeah.
Yeah, and if there's a Small Town Monsters documentary where I can't remember the name of the two people that filmed this stuff, but there's some very, very recent footage that I think we talked about on our Brown Mountain Lights episode. Mm-hmm. But just look up the Small Town Monsters Brown Mountain Lights thing. You'll see my brother Micah in the first 5 minutes, so you'll know you're watching the right thing.
Talking about the Cherokee lore around it, right?
That footage is in there.
Yeah.
And it is incredible.
Yeah.
It is some of the craziest footage. I mean,
are you talking about Jesse's stuff? Yeah.
What is their Hellbent Holler?
Yeah, Hellbent Holler.
Yeah. The Hellbent Holler people are the ones, and maybe you can just look at that on their YouTube channel. But that is truly one of the strangest videos I've ever seen of something at Brown Mountain.
Yeah.
I've seen tons of videos from Brown Mountain where I was like, I don't think this is anything. That one is a real head scratcher.
For sure. And it moves in kind of a plasma-like form.
Yeah.
Whether that's intelligently or not is up for debate. But the fact that Burroughs himself, who was kind of the more reserved one with his interpretation, is not ruling it out as it being some sort of intelligence, I think is pretty damn interesting.
Oh, yeah.
So, even more recently as this year, in fact, just a few months ago, a couple of new firsthand witnesses have come forward with their version of the story, which I'll say is even more wild than Holt's account, I guess. There's a new or upcoming documentary called Capel Green about the Rendlesham Forest incident, and producer and director Dion Johnson, he put this together basically based off the testimony of two witnesses from that night, Larry Warren and Steve Longaro, and they both worked for the U.S. Air Force security at the time of the incident. They were stationed on the base, but as security professionals, not necessarily officers. But they say they not only saw the suspicious aircraft in 1980, but they were told to keep their mouth shut by government officials.
All right.
And now they're coming forward. All three of them were recently interviewed on News Nation by your boy.
Oh yeah, old Ross.
Old Ross.
There's a lot of UFO stuff coming through News Nation these days.
Yeah,
huh?
they seem to be I don't know if you could call that mainstream media, but closest to mainstream media that's kind of taken a UFO beat, if you will.
Yeah.
Which, I think it's interesting that stuff like this gets put out into public awareness. I don't necessarily think that every case that News Nation is covering is, I don't know if I need to say any of this.
You do what you want. I mean, look, it's no secret that Ross at News Nation makes some extraordinary claims.
Yeah.
These things could very well shake out to be true. But one of the big things that he's talked about recently is there's some sort of buried UFO that is so big that there's like this structure that's been built around it. And he seems to have a reliable source that's told him where this is, and he seems to know. He can't divulge that to the public, and it's yet to be seen if that shakes out or not. But again, it's a very extraordinary claim.
Yeah. And
no matter what.
And I think that makes for good entertainment, if nothing else. So you go on and watch the interview and kind of use your own judgment, but you kind of get the side of the story with Larry and Steve. And really, you get into the first 5 minutes of the interview, and it's just them being very, very defensive during the interview towards the people that they kind of perceive as attacking them or their credibility or calling them liars. And it's just them kind of going on really just angry tirades about how people don't take them seriously. And I don't know. For me, I would understand frustrations in that situation, but I'll leave that up for you. It's on YouTube if you want to watch it. Just kind of read the body language, if nothing else, is all I'll say. But Ross does point out directly to them that their version of the story has a few discrepancies from the original version that we outlined here. And some of these kind of come in, like the date of the occurrence is a little bit different in their version. And, some of them come into it like they're basically claiming that Holt was withholding information in his testimony. He knew more to the story than he was letting on, and that he was kind of playing into the cover-up himself. They both describe witnessing a craft, but Larry also goes on to claim that he witnessed non-human entities in the forest that night. First, he described them as ghosts, and then later says they looked basically exactly like the being on the cover of Whitley Strieber's Communion, kind of the classic gray alien image. And they essentially allude to just Holt and company only telling part of the full true story and being complicit in this cover-up themselves. Now, Larry claims that he changed and left out crucial pieces of information that really could have led to the truth of the incident, and basically kind of just accused Holt of lying in this whole interview. And I guess not for nothing, I'll mention it, Larry did take a polygraph test and he apparently passed. And he just went on to challenge Holt to do the same and left it at that. So, Hey, I mean, I'm not going to argue with the man. I'll let him have his own claim on that. And if that's his story, I think that he's entitled to that. I don't think you necessarily need to attack someone else's credibility as much as he did in his interview, because as we kind of go back to with Pennington and Burroughs, like they both experienced the same thing. They both have drastically different interpretations of it. Just because what Larry claims to have seen, he feels his interpretation makes Holt a liar, which I feel was a step too far in attacking someone's kind of personal credibility in that way.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, maybe when we talk about this idea of people getting into these situations and they're experiencing feelings of like being in slow motion, maybe there is a temporal distortion where people experience different stuff.
Yeah, maybe so. And that's a really good possibility. But
that's not the one I'm going with. I'm throwing it out there. Who knows? These guys could just be making something up.
Who knows? But the story doesn't end there, because even more recently, actually just last month, Ross and News Nation had a follow-up episode to the one we just mentioned, and they had Charles Holt himself on to defend his title.
Bam.
And this dude is up there in age, but still sharp as a tack. Like, can recall this incident like it was yesterday. He's up on pretty much all his research. He's able to cite other cases in history. He's a sharp cookie, which I think almost kind of furthers his credibility on this dude wasn't seeing a frickin' lighthouse and assuming that was something strange.
Hey, good for him though, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. And in his kind of interview, he's a lot more calm and level-headed, and he just kind of disputes Larry's claim that he was in the forest with him that night. Holt claims that he even talked to Larry's girlfriend at the time after, hearing that Larry was making claims that he saw similar things, but Larry's girlfriend claimed that he was back at the dormitory drinking on base, and even mentioned the next day that he was bummed that he missed all the excitement. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, quite honestly, it really seems like Ross was really just trying to stir the pot and kind of create some drama between the two sides of them. And hey, it's Christmas. There's no room for that here.
Yeah.
So, look, if you have 2 hours to spare and you really want to dive into the recent drama on this case, you could find both those News Nation interviews on YouTube. And Cable Green, I guess it's had its release overseas in a few places, but you can look for that to premiere in America sometime in 2026. So we could get, hopefully the less dramatic version on their side of the story.
Is it on European streaming?
No, I think it had like just a theatrical debut, and then he was doing a debut in Spain. And I think he said America would be sometime in 2026, but it's all independent distribution. So it's not like direct to streaming right now.
Yeah.
But, I think that'll be interesting because, hey, the fact that this story is still getting talked about and, pieces are still being added to the lore 45 years later, that's pretty cool.
Oh, dude, hell yeah. And it's so fortunate for people that are independent researchers of this kind of thing that we still have people like, is it Halt?
Yeah, Halt, H-A-L-T.
H-A-L-T.
Yeah.
Okay, that we still have people like him around that remember this stuff and are still talking about it. I mean, that's incredible. You don't always get that in situations like this.
Exactly. And like you said, he's kind of going out with this level-headed approach of standing by his story that I saw something weird. I think it was of extraterrestrial origin, but doesn't go too much deeper into it than that. And almost like goes as far as to say like some of the other more extraordinary claims. He's like, no, I'm not going to put my name on that one. But I think it's cool that someone who came from being a complete skeptic on this whole topic came all the way around to be what is pretty much the biggest voice and advocate for this story to this day.
I'm right there with you, man. I mean, I have to say, there's so much information in this one and so many different points of, how different people interpret the story. So it's like, it's hard to know what to think about this.
Exactly. And that's kind of what I think is kind of interesting. It almost parallels with last week's episode. It's like everything from the origins of Santa Claus to alleged UFO incidents that occurred almost 50 years ago. You get that range of people from the skeptics to the true believers that feel very strongly that their side of the story is the one true account. And nothing else can be true because what they believe is the end all be all.
Yeah.
So, you get that in history, obviously, you get that in UFO lore. But, just circling back to it, like being open to the possibility of Santa Claus origins being traced back to psychedelic mushrooms and that same Christmas spirit, I think I'm just going to be open to the possibility that whatever occurred in the forest that night was something strange. And I'll leave it at that. Whether that was a craft, whether that was some unexplained non-human plasma life form, I don't know. But I think that when you have some trained observers like that, you got to have some credibility to it. And at the same time, maybe they just witnessed some strange, unexplained military advanced technology. I still say you could chalk that up to being strange.
Dude, you ain't kidding. The whole damn thing is just all over the place. It's very interesting. It's very wild. It's cool that we still have stuff like this that we can be talking about to this day and dude, look at Roswell, for the love of God. Like, we're still trying, like, there's a lot of people out there. They're still trying to figure out what that thing is.
Yeah. And even outside of the whole getting to the roots of the truth on something like Roswell, look at what the Roswell incident has brought to the town of Roswell. That put the area on the map. That brings in a whole new form of tourism that, you could kind of base some economic success on. And the fact that you have Rendlesham that has the UFO trail incorporated into it and they embrace it just the same. I think it's cool that they're not like brushing these weird experiences or incidents under the rug. They're embracing that as part of their history.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, hey, good for them.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate that.
Well, dude, I gotta say, as somebody that didn't know a ton about this particular incident, you've, as always, done a hell of a job looking at all of the different angles. And boy, there's a lot to look at in this.
Yeah, there really is. Because, it's just so hard to really pick where to land. And, I'm really just not in the spirit or mood to go into just fully debunking everything, because I think you really just run the risk of kind of coming across like these extreme skeptics of the view of, well, this has to be the end all be all to this. Like there could be a lot of gray area in some of these cases. And this is a perfect example of that.
Yeah. I'm still going with Sauron.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. That one makes the most sense to me. That Sauron detached from the tower and was the floating eyeball from hell.
I'm going to go with Santa was making his return to the North Pole and they saw some red lights in the sky. And hey, what do you know? We birthed one of the biggest UFO lore pieces in history.
I like that. Can I add something?
Yeah, sure.
So Santa's flying back to the North Pole, right?
Tripping his balls off.
Tripping balls, baby, because, he's a big mushroom user, big drinker of psilocybin-infused reindeer urine. And he gets done with the reindeer urine. He's tripping like crazy. He opens up his bottle of gin, and he's like, ho, 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 bitches. And some mechanism.
It mists.
Lights that bottle of gin on fire. And the whole back of the sleigh is just burning like hellfire. And he's screaming, Daughter Blitzen, holy shit, help, oh God. That one makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I think we could officially enter this into the Rendlesham lore now, right?
Yeah. I mean, somebody's going to be thinking about that scenario when they think about Rendlesham from now on. And for that, America and other countries, you're welcome. Well, dude, as always, great job on this stuff. And, the Dr. Captain has laid out the facts for you right there, and to the best of his ability in a concise time frame. But I think it's up to you guys. I think it's up to you guys to all go look into this stuff and do your own research. And if you find out anything crazy or something that you think tends to be, maybe that ever elusive smoking gun when it comes to the Rendlesham case, well, drop us a line.
Yeah.
We'd love to hear about it. Any other closing thoughts, Austin?
No, I think I'm ready to go enjoy the rest of the holiday. What about you, buddy?
You and me both, brother. I am going to go do an oil painting of that whole scenario with Santa Claus with the sleigh on fire.
Ooh, I might have to commission one.
Yeah. That said, as always, we want to thank every single one of you for listening to our humble little podcast, Ghosts in the Mountains. Thanks for sticking in there with us. It's a year, dude. Can you believe we're almost closing out the whole year?
Yeah. Oh, my God.
So cool. Congratulations.
Right?
A lot of podcasts don't last this long.
Next week's episode 50. Oh, my God.
Episode 50, baby. We're going to have to do something really wild for episode 100. But that said, thanks so much for hanging out with us for a year on this podcast, everybody. This has been such a fun experiment for, me and Austin, and I'm enjoying it still. I'm loving this.
Oh, yeah. This is tradition at this point.
We ain't going nowhere, everybody. And 2026, probably going to be we got big things coming, fam.
Big things are coming, and it's not just aliens.
Yeah, exactly. But if you are somehow just now tuning into the show and this is your first time and want to know more about who we are and what we do, you can go to ghostsinthemountains.com. You can become a Patreon subscriber for a ad-free version of the podcast and some behind-the-scenes goodies. I was just looking at some of the footage last night of our paranormal investigation of the Lake Lure Inn, and man, what a vibe. So cozy. We're going to be putting that together for all of our Patreon subscribers. Video, the whole shebang of everything that we experienced down there, and it was wild. There was some interesting stuff, to say the least.
Yeah.
So, again, if you want to get in touch with us, you can get in touch with us at ghostsinthemountains@gmail.com. And as always, thank you so very much for listening, and we will catch you on the very next episode of Ghosts in the Mountains as we round out the first year. Stay cozy and stay spooky, everybody. I would say there's a pretty low likelihood that anybody that was on the Air Force Base was drinking psilocybin-infused reindeer urine.
Hey, 'tis the season, man. This is Christmas. You never know.
I think a lot more people do that at Christmas than they like to speak publicly about.
Probably so. If this is your Christmas tradition, please let us know.
You heard it here first, everybody. Rendlesham was nothing but reindeer piss. All right, there's your Easter egg. We love you. Good night.